Hello, welcome to Quilt in Color. Today is day 14 of the 15 Minutes to Quilt Challenge. Today I'm going to be working on an album quilt. This is another one of my quilts that I started making before I had the skills to make it. Together we're going to figure out how to miter the corners of the sashing on all of the blocks in this quilt. Let's get started. Okay, the blocks for this quilt are in a scrapbook box. I really like the scrapbook boxes as a way to store them because they can fit 12.5-inch blocks. So the front is a pattern. This is what the album quilt looks like. Hope I'm not shaking the camera because the scrap box is touching the tripod. And as you can see, there's templates on here. This is a really old pattern that I worked with, and I actually had the patterns, although I did write down the sizes, so it does look like I did use a rotary cutter for this quilt. You can see each of the blocks have a sashing around them. And this is what the quilt looks like. And let's look what my blocks look like. Move this out of the way. Move them out of the way. So I got the bright idea that I could use this sashing for this quilt, and as you can see, the sashing is like a border print, and my bright idea was that I could miter the corners on this border print to make a frame around the block itself. So let's just look at the blocks. I really like the colors on this quilt. These are all upside down. In my memory, it seemed like I had sewn a lot more of the border prints than I actually did. I thought I had gotten a lot more progress in sewing these than I did. I think there are 2 of each fabric, I'm not sure. And I know for sure that I've already given one of them away as a pillow. Hopefully it was an extra block. And then there's some, this is what I was remembering that they would look like, is that they already have the sashing sewn on, and then I was having trouble finding a way to miter the corners. You can see 3 of those, this one is done. 3 of the corners have been mitered, and this one just needs 1 more. We'll save that one for today. And then it looks like we have ones that are finished. So this is what the finished block will look like. It has the album block, and it's got the border print, and the block is mitered, so it forms a nice frame around it. Let me show you the frame. Sorry, this camera is not up high enough for you to be able to see the whole thing all at once. I'll have to save that one so I can show you one on the other camera. Here's another one that's done. Here's another one that's done. Here's another one that's done. And there's another one that's done. And then there's lots of fabric left over to make the rest of them. Some of them have already been cut out. Looks, it's fussy cut so that they will fit correctly. You can see the print looks like this. And that means I'm going to be losing some of the fabric here when I'm making the fussy cut. And these have not been sewn, so maybe today we can work on these 3 blocks. Okay, so there's 3 ways that I can think about mitering corners. Okay, so the correct way to do this is that you would sew this border onto the block and then stop at 1/4 of an inch before you get to the end, because that's where this seam would stop, and the next one, because that's where they would meet. So you stop this at 1/4 inch. You stop this one at 1/4 inch. You can see on this one that this one's a little more than 1/4 an inch. And then the next step, once you have done that part, is that you fold this block like this into a triangle. Make sure you match the prints together. Make sure you match the borders together. And then you start from 1/4 of an inch here, and so this way, I guess this would be straight this way. Sew this together. So what you would do here is to match these, and then you'd be able to start here at the seam where the 2 seams intersect. Start here and then sew the rest of this way, so that when you do that, I'm going to put a pin here so you can see this as being sewn already. And when you put it together, then you'll have the seam here, and it'll match. Now the important thing about being able to do this is that this block must be square. And as you've seen from my video yesterday, making blocks square was not something that I knew about. I didn't really trim blocks before. And so like you can see, I still hear the dog. I haven't even trimmed off the dog ears. So then I wind up, if you don't properly stop at 1/4 inch here and here, then you could wind up with not finding the exact intersection to start sewing this thing, and so these may get bulky here, or these might not match each other correctly. Another way I thought about doing this is to applique this, because if you applique it, then you can exactly see where everything's gonna line up, and that'll make sure that it's done. Another option is to, once everything is lined up correctly, to sew this down. And even though you can see this little seam here, I think if you do it small enough, if you do it close enough to the edge, I don't think it'll be that obvious. But so far in this quilt, it looks like I was able to do it in a hidden way. So I might either hand applique this, or another option is to baste everything. And when you baste it, then you can make sure everything is lined up right. It'll be easy to pull out the stitches if it isn't, and try again. And another thing is that you can press everything and make sure that you know exactly where the seam will be. And then once you do that, then it just does make it easier to be able to sew with a machine. So let me think about a plan for this one, and then we'll see where to go from here. This has been a long time since I've mitered corners, and this is not an easy thing to do for me, but I think it'll be fine. You can see that I cut these a little bit bigger than I needed them to be. Here, on this side, you can see the excess fabric here. That way, if there was any problems, I had enough leeway to be able to make sure that there was plenty of fabric to make the corner. So I'll press these blocks first, and you can see that I haven't trimmed off the rest of these blocks yet. This is excess fabric that can be used for other projects. So what am I doing? I'm taking these 3 blocks, I'm going to press them because I want to make sure that they are not wrinkled, and then we'll get to sewing. Normally I would press upstairs with the ironing board and the bigger iron, but I only have 15 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and show you on the small mat. And this tripod's not working right, so you get real close-ups on the pressing. But that might be good, that you can see the block close up. You can see I use a muslin as a background to keep with that old-fashioned look. And you can see that this is a really nice miter here. This one, yeah, you can see the nice miter. This one is a little sloppy. This one is really bad because it's got the pucker in here. And this one's pretty bad too because it has a pucker. So at some point I might try to fix that, or maybe I'll just let it go. I have to decide that later. I think in the overall scheme of things it probably won't be all that obvious, but I might try to fix these two eventually. This one looks pretty good. And this isn't exactly straight. I think it's close enough. It'll depend on how it matches with the rest of the block. And I haven't decided whether I'm going to use a plain sashing in between these, or whether I'll just sew these together next to each other, side by side. Probably a sashing would work better the way the pattern is, but that'll make the quilt really big because this sashing is wider than this one. My sashing is wider than the one that's in the pattern, but I can fix that by just using fewer number of blocks, and I can turn more of these into pillows if I need to. Another option that I have is to avoid the miters. I have a lot of blocks. I can just use a different border fabric, different sashing fabric. Another option I have is just to use a different sashing fabric, and then I wouldn't have to miter any corners. But I have a good number of them done, so I really don't want to start over again. But what I can try to do here is see if I can miter these. If I can turn this one, is that? Turn both of these into 45-degree angles. This one looks pretty good actually. You can see, oh, you can't see. Hold this down. Okay, so if I could just turn this one at a 45-degree angle and this one at a 45-degree angle, you can see that the matching works pretty well here. Actually, I like that. I can press these down. And it looks like the way I'm doing it is I'm starting at 1/4 of an inch in to do the turn. Well, this one doesn't do that. Not sure how far in this needs to be. I think probably it needs to go up. Like this. Let's press this and pin it, and we'll see. Pull the iron out of the way so I don't burn myself, and then I could pin these. Oops, need to pin them inside. I'm going to fold the quilt top. I'm going to fold the block in half, and that will take me to making both of these match each other. And then I can pin where I had I think the join has to be this way and not way over here, which is what the creases look like. So it'll look like this, maybe. Like this. I'll put one close to the seam and then open it to see what it's going to look like. Okay. Have to make sure that the block itself is underneath, and then it's possible that the pins themselves are kind of in the way. Okay, so I'm going to take this center pin out because it's not matching exactly. I think this one needs to be folded in a little bit more to match. Like this. Make sure that this is straight and this is straight. Like this. I had taken this quilt into a local quilt shop to ask them what I was doing wrong, and that's what they said, is that the original block isn't square, and that's what's causing the problems with this quilt, with making the mitered borders. But I'm an improv quilter, and I think I can fudge it to make it work. Okay, so if I press this down, this is a crease I can use for this side. Looks like I'm off a little bit again. What happened? Okay, so it's a little bit of a gap here, but I think that my trying to make it perfect is going to make it worse rather than trying to do it the way it is. So that was one option that I was thinking about, and I think I have done some this way, is instead of folding both of the fabrics, I just folded one of them and appliqued it down, and then I didn't have to worry about the other one. But let's see if we can find a way to do it the right way, just to see if we can figure out how to do proper miters. Okay, so if I'm doing this the right way, I think it would just sew these together, but I want to make sure that like this spot matches this spot. And this matches the line on here. I think that's that's right. Didn't do that perfectly. That's a little better, and that's better too. This one looks lumpy. But that might just be because of the way the fabric is laid. Nope. I think this one needs to go out a little bit farther, maybe. There's some work that's finicky and some work that is not, and I think sometimes it just takes some time to figure out what you're doing, and if it's not working right, to figure out a different plan. And this one here I think now matches okay. This one's not lumpy. This one is not exactly perfect, but I think it's close enough for my taste. And then this one also is, so I think this looks good to me. And it's a matter of making sure that I match. I can go ahead without moving anything and pinning these. It's the pin that's making it lumpy now. Pretty sure. Yep, I think it's going to look good if I just sew these two together the way where the pins are exactly. The pins help show what it's going to look like at the end, and the pins also help show exactly where to sew. This seam is not properly sewn all the way to the 1/4 inch. Tiny stitches. That looks better. Of course, I had to take out this pin to do that. Let's see if it's going to look okay. Yep. It's a little lumpy, but I think it'll be fine. I'm following the crease line that was made when we did the pressing. And now the quality inspection, the big reveal. This is lumpy here. Still a little bit lumpy, but not too bad. Basting always works for this. And also I have another way that I've made mitered corners in the past, is that instead of making a Y seam, what I've done is turn the miter part of it into a half square triangle and then sewn them as a regular block, and that worked really well for me too. So I've made a decision about this quilt. I do not want to be making mitered corners in all of the blocks. So what I'm going to do is separate out the quilt into two parts. I'm going to take the ones that already have mitered borders and put those in one quilt. Maybe it'll be whatever, depending on how many blocks there are. It'll just depend on how big that quilt is going to be. And for the blocks that don't have any sashing on them, I'm going to find a sashing that does not require mitered borders and see what I can make out of that. I think that this was probably supposed to be a pretty big quilt, and since I don't really make that many big quilts anymore, I'm not trying to make a quilt for my bed. I think it'll be fine if I just turn this into two projects. And for the sashing that I've already cut, that I've already fussy cut, I don't mind using that for a border on the whole quilt, because it's mitering borders is not that bad. It's okay. I'm not saying I'll never do mitered borders again, but I just don't want to have to do them for every single block. So I might have to just sew these again, sew them up, since I have cut them into widths, or maybe I'll make quilts that are this size to be able to use them up. But so that's my new plan. I'm going to make a note on an index card so that I'll know the next time I pick this quilt up that this is actually 2 or more quilts. So at least now this block is finished. This video is one of a series of videos where I'm showing you each of my projects one by one and working on them 15 minutes at a time. I hope you enjoy seeing all of the progress on all of my quilts and get some inspiration, get some advice. I hope that you join me and sew along with me. And if you do, just let me know in the comments below what you worked on, how much you got done in your 15 minutes, and I'll give you an entry in the drawing. Good luck to you. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support, and I'll see you again tomorrow.